Good evening, and welcome to the Walker Lecture Series. My name is John Kelly, and I am one of the trustees of the Walker Lecture Series, and it is my pleasure to serve with our other trustees, Alwyn Fine, Paula Demers, Joanne Martin, and our president, Dale Harrington. We have gone digital. Like all of you, we are adjusting to our new reality, and we're glad that you are here with us. Even in these uncertain times, we have more plans in store, and we hope that you keep in touch with us to join us for future events. The best way to keep in touch with us is to go to our website, walkerlecture.org, and to sign up for our email newsletter. We are able to go digital because of help from some wonderful partners. One of them is ConcordTV. You've already discovered ConcordTV, but I certainly encourage you to check out their website at yourconcordtv.org. Another partner is the Hatbox Theatre, which is why we are here in this beautiful space tonight. You can learn more about the Hatbox at hatboxnh.com. Tonight's presenter is Ed Webster. A veteran of 7 Himalayan expeditions, Ed Webster is one of North America's best-known rock climbers and mountaineers. His resume includes several world-famous climbs, notably his first ascent of a new route up Mount Everest's remote, highly dangerous Kangshung face in Tibet, as part of an international 4-man team in 1988. The expedition climbed Everest with no oxygen bottles, radios, or Sherpa assistance, in an ascent that climbing legend Reinhold Messner hailed as the best-styled climb of Mount Everest. Ed's writing and photographs have appeared worldwide in more than 50 magazine articles in such publications as Climbing, Rock and Ice, Popular Mechanics, Rolling Stone, and the New York Times Sunday Magazine. He has written 5 books, including his definitive guidebook, Rock Climbs in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, as well as Climbing in the Magic Islands to the Lofoten Islands of Arctic Norway, and Snow in the Kingdom, My Storm Years on Everest, his best-selling autobiography. Snow in the Kingdom is now available on Amazon as a Kindle e-book. Ed is one of only 3 mountaineers cited in the board game Trivial Pursuit. Please welcome Ed Webster.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Walker Lecture Series. My name is Ed Webster, and I live over on the coast of Maine, but I've had a long history with New Hampshire, and I authored the rock climbing guidebook to the White Mountains of New Hampshire, 3 different editions of this book, so I've had a lot of fun climbing locally here in New Hampshire. And in addition, I participated on 3 Mount Everest expeditions, and this is the Mount Everest book that I wrote, Snow in the Kingdom. More recently, I've had the great privilege of visiting Antarctica probably over 20 times in the last 3 years, working for a company called Quark Expeditions based in Canada. And this has been another of my dreams come true. I've had a very blessed life. I've been very fortunate to have been able to participate on some absolutely amazing adventures in different parts of the world. And going to Antarctica was just as important to me as climbing on Mount Everest. So my Antarctic dreams have also come true, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. I worked as a polar history lecturer on cruise ships for Quark Expeditions. And I'd like to thank Quark Expeditions, the different guests that were on our cruise ships in the past 3 years, and also 2 of the expedition photographers, Michelle Soule and Keith Thompson. Approximately 80% of the photographs in this presentation are ones that I took, and the others were taken by a variety of other people. And thank you to those photographers. When we look at our beautiful planet from outer space, we can clearly see at the southern end of the globe the large white frozen landmass of Antarctica. Antarctica is land. It is covered by snow and ice. Only 2% of the continent is actually land and rock. The remaining portions of the continent are completely frozen. Some of the ice cap in Antarctica is over 2 miles thick. And Antarctica, well, if we think of the most remote place on Earth, imagine you're going to the most remote place on our planet. Most of you probably will guess correctly that that is the continent of Antarctica. It is the hardest continent to reach, the most expensive continent to get to. You have to really work at it. It is the ends of the Earth. And so it was the last of all the continents to be discovered. However, hundreds of years ago, it was actually the Greek philosopher Aristotle who came up with an idea, a hypothesis that, in fact, there must be a landmass in the southern hemisphere to counterbalance the large continents that were known in his time, Europe and Asia and Africa, a large landmass in the southern hemisphere to counterbalance the other continents. And this mythical landmass got the name of Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. And for the next several hundred years, explorers searched the seas and searched the remote corners of the earth, trying to find the unknown southern land. Potentially new races of people and new habitable parts of the world. They didn't know. And the first European to explore the South Atlantic Ocean and also the continent that became known as South America was Ferdinand Magellan from Portugal. He led what became the first expedition. Imagine, to sail all the way around the entire globe. And this expedition, believe it or not, took 5 years. Only about 20 men survived the entire journey. 4 of the 5 ships were lost. So it was a very, very difficult, dangerous expedition financed by the Spanish crown. And during his explorations, Magellan sailed down the southeast coastline of South America from Brazil heading south, and he discovered a strait, an opening of a seaway that went all the way through the continent of South America. And today we know this as the Strait of Magellan. Magellan also was the explorer who named several key elements of the map that we may not remember this today, but he named the Pacific Ocean. He also named, because it was so peaceful and quiet and it was Pacific, it was a calm ocean when he saw it, he also named another body of land just to the south of the Strait of Magellan, Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire. Tierra del Fuego. He named it not because of volcanoes, but because of the people, the native peoples who lived on the coastline, built fires at night, maybe as a warning sign to the explorers, but also to keep warm because it was cold down there. So Tierra del Fuego, the Pacific Ocean, named by Magellan. Magellan also named Patagonia, the southern region of South America. So once Magellan had discovered his namesake passage, linking the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean, other sailors took notice, including Magellan had discovered his strait in 1520. in the mid-1570s, so 50 years later approximately, Sir Francis Drake, England's great pirate, captain, explorer, a favorite of Queen Elizabeth I, Francis Drake set off on what became the second circumnavigation of the globe, for which he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth upon his return. So Drake's ships made it through the Strait of Magellan, the second expedition to do so. But after he had passed through the Strait of Magellan, his ship, the Golden Hind, was blown far to the south by a ferocious storm to 57 degrees of south latitude. But when he was in this location, far to the south, perhaps farther south than any other person had ever been, he noticed that the waters of the Pacific Ocean and the waters of the Atlantic Ocean met in what he called a free and large scope, big waves. And this body of water directly below the tip of South America, the southern tip, is now known today as the Drake Passage. It is one of the stormiest oceans on Earth. I have now sailed across it about 20 times. It is ferocious. So we'll see some more photographs of the Drake Passage coming up. So what about this unknown southern land? What of it? Did anyone discover land in the Southern Ocean? The map makers had a field day imagining what the Terra Australis Incognita may have looked like. And at one point, they actually drew it as a landmass this large, encompassing the entire southern portion of the globe. But in the 1770s, Captain James Cook, one of the most famous navigators of all times, from Britain, he made three circumnavigations of the globe within about a 10 or 12 year period. And Captain Cook finally disproved the existence of the unknown southern land. And the reason why Captain Cook said it didn't exist is because, believe it or not, it was so foggy around Antarctica, which is a common weather condition. There were so many threatening icebergs, like this one, that Captain Cook never saw the continent of Antarctica. He never had a clear view of those ice and glacier-covered mountains. Otherwise, he would have been the discoverer of Antarctica. But he never saw the landmass. He discovered multiple islands that are now known as the sub-Antarctic islands, but he never saw the continent. So he came back and he reported about all the seals and the whales that he had seen. And it was actually the sealing captains, who were American sealing ships and also British, who sailed to the Falkland Islands and to South Georgia, this island. And then one of those sealers was blown off course, and he discovered these islands here, known as the South Shetland Islands. And so here's the Antarctic Peninsula, which you're going to see a lot of here in this show tonight. But the South Shetland Islands were the first part of Antarctica to be discovered. But here is a view that I took of the South Shetland Islands, of one of the islands, Nelson Island. My very first glimpse of Antarctica was this glacier-covered island and then these mounds of rock, these fingers of rock sticking up, which I naturally thought looked like really good rock climbing potential. But who was it in history who first saw the continent of Antarctica? It's been really, it's a bit of a tangle. And it turns out it was actually this man, a Russian admiral named Fabian Bellinghausen. And Bellinghausen sailed like Captain Cook, who he admired, Bellinghausen sailed also all the way around Antarctica in the 1820s, and he wrote in his logbook that he saw ice and glacier-covered mountains. He didn't even know that he had discovered and seen the seventh continent on Earth, but he is now given credit for that discovery. His two ships were the Mirny on the left, meaning peaceful, and the Vostok on the east, which was the larger ship, his flagship. And so Bellinghausen today is not a well-known name, although the ocean right off the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula is the Bellinghausen Sea, just south of the Drake Passage. So very slowly, throughout the 1800s, other expeditions made that long voyage from warmer climates in the northern hemisphere all the way across the equator, along the coast of South America, all the way into the frigid, frozen, storm-tossed waters of the South Atlantic. And slowly, in a patchwork fashion, different parts of Antarctica were unveiled, were discovered, and revealed. And this man, Sir James Clark Ross, known as the most handsome man in the British Navy, which indeed he probably was, he led in the 1840s the British National Expedition to Antarctica. And James Clark Ross and his two ships, named the Erebus and the Terror was the other ship, they, from a base in New Zealand, which is the opposite side of Antarctica, on the opposite side of Antarctica from the Antarctic Peninsula in South America, from New Zealand they sailed south towards the unknown southern land and managed to, for the first time, sail through the pack ice. And the pack ice is a dense belt of broken, jagged pieces of ice every spring that forms off Antarctica. He managed to get through the pack ice into the tranquil setting of what became known as the Ross Sea. He named Mount Erebus after his flagship, and eventually the Ross Ice Shelf was also named in his honor. And so James Clark Ross was a very important figure. And imagine how astonished these sailors must have been when, on a clear day, they looked across at this unknown land and they saw an erupting volcano covered with snow and ice and glaciers. And this is Mount Erebus, named for James Clark Ross's ship. In years to come, American scientists would establish on Ross Island, which is where Mount Erebus is located, Americans would establish the largest scientific base in Antarctica, McMurdo Station, which I have photographs a bit later. And so, slowly Antarctica is being unveiled. The next important explorer was in the 1890s, a Belgian naval officer, Captain Adrien de Gerlache. And so the Belgian Antarctic expedition from 1897 to 1899 was a very, very important trip that gave place names, because that's your honor when you're an explorer. You get to name unknown pieces of land and oceans and seas and bays. You get to name them, and your names perhaps will show up on the maps. Adrien de Gerlache named over 100 geographic locations in Antarctica, and his motto, I always like studying the mottos of these famous explorers. Adrien de Gerlache, always see your goal, not the obstacles. Robert Peary from Maine, who was the discoverer of the North Pole, had a very American motto, I will find a way or make one. That was Peary's motto. Sir Ernest Shackleton, who we'll see later, by endurance we overcome. That maybe is a COVID motto. By endurance we overcome. So Adrien de Gerlache, he had a young sailor with him who became extremely famous, This is the young Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen, who later became the first to reach the South Pole. So Amundsen was also on the Belgica expedition. And this expedition of Belgians, Norwegians, there was a Polish man, a Romanian crew member, and also one American, the doctor, Dr. Frederick Cook, who's in this picture on the right. This expedition was notable, the Belgica expedition, for really breaking new ground in Antarctica. It was the first truly scientific expedition to the continent. They were the first team to camp on Antarctica in this flimsy-looking tent here. They also skied in Antarctica. They had sledges. You can see their wooden sledge on the far right, snowshoes. So they camped out and skied and sledged in Antarctica. And they also were the first team to spend the winter on the continent. And they took some terrific photographs. This one of the Adelie penguins. Beautiful image taken in the 1890s, this photograph. And when their ship was trapped in the sea ice, far to the south, just south of the Antarctic Circle, 67 degrees of south latitude, they were forced to spend the entire winter camping on the ship. One man died, but Frederick Cook, the doctor, and Roald Amundsen, they knew from their research and reading, they knew that the Inuit, the Eskimo of the Arctic, survived these long, cruel months of darkness and a lack of vegetables in their diet by eating raw meat. And so Dr. Cook fed the men small portions of raw seal meat and raw whale, and they were able to survive the winter. And so the Belgica expedition of Adrien de Gerlache, very important expedition, leaving from Tierra del Fuego, the southern tip of South America. Cape Horn is down here as well, across the Drake Passage to the South Shetland Islands, along the Antarctic Peninsula. The Gerlache Strait is now named in his honor, and then down to the Antarctic Circle, and eventually they were freed from the ice. Here's a modern day map to show you in detail some of the other place names of this portion of Antarctica. And the Antarctic Peninsula, many, many different islands. The South Shetland Islands to the north here, right in here. This is called the Weddell Sea, Antarctic Circle. And you'll also notice some of the ice shelves, like the Larsen ice shelf. And these are the ice shelves are where the big tabular icebergs are born from, the big rectangular icebergs. But how big is Antarctica? Well, I have to confess, I borrowed this picture from the internet, but it really gives a dramatic and clear overview of the size of the continent. It is 1.5 times the size of the continental United States. Antarctica is the same size in landmass as the United States and France joined together. So the Antarctic Peninsula, again, it looks like a tail, almost like a scorpion tail here, going up to the north and east, with the tail of South America here to the north, and the Drake Passage right in here. There is a current of cold seawater known as the Antarctic Convergence. And the Antarctic Convergence, the circumpolar Antarctic current, flows clockwise continuously all the way around Antarctica. And it insulates Antarctica from the warmer waters of the north, of northern latitudes. And so this is one of the reasons why Antarctica has been so well preserved. It is the last pristine piece of geography and nature on Earth. To this day, the only man-made objects that you come across are scientific research stations, which are very small and discreet, usually made of wood. And there are about 50 or 60 different science research stations in Antarctica, each built and maintained by different countries of the world. Here are some additional geographic names for you for Antarctica. Antarctica is divided in half geographically between West Antarctica and East Antarctica. The geographic pole in the center, the Antarctic Peninsula to the north. Here's the Ross Sea and the Ross Ice Shelf. And there's a mountain range called the Transantarctic Mountains that goes across the center of the continent, which also that's the landform that divides Antarctica in half. And here is the highest mountain in Antarctica, 16,000 feet above sea level, called the Vinson Massif. And so Antarctica is a land of extremes. And that's maybe why it's always been such a lure for the adventurous, intrepid explorers of earlier days, including Sir Ernest Shackleton, seen here. Now, many of you watching probably have read a book about Shackleton, about his famous expedition called the Endurance Expedition. And there are, I'll just go ahead one more picture here. There are several books about the Endurance Expedition, and the book that I have enjoyed reading the most, this was the very first book I read on Antarctica, Endurance, Shackleton's Boat Journey, by Alfred Lansing, who is an American author. So this is the book on the upper right of the screen. It is one of the most riveting adventure books you'll ever read. You may also be in tears, as I was at the end. I highly recommend Lansing's Endurance. South is the book that Ernest Shackleton wrote about the expedition. And The Endurance, Shackleton's legendary Antarctic expedition by Carolyn Alexander, is a picture book that has the magnificent photographs taken on the trip. Shackleton's boat, which he named Endurance after his family motto, by endurance we overcome, was trapped in the sea ice off the coast of Antarctica, crushed and sank. Shackleton gave the abandoned ship order, though, as soon as the boat began to be crushed by the ice, and all 28 men were then marooned on the ice floes of Antarctica. I won't tell you what happened. It's an amazing adventure story, how they managed to find their way and fight their way to safety. It took about a year and a half. No radios, no one knew where they were. This was 1916, 1917, very early days, the golden age of polar exploration. And so when Shackleton was organizing the Endurance expedition, rumor has it that he placed a classified ad in a London paper to advertise for people who wanted to go on the expedition, for the men. And women also applied. And so it's become a famous example of Antarctic writing. And in a nutshell, it really encapsulates what it's like to be in Antarctica. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, no money, bitter cold. The coldest place on Earth is minus 85 degrees Celsius in Antarctica in the wintertime. So bitter cold, long months of complete darkness. In the Antarctic winter, the sun disappears below the horizon, and you have no sunshine at all for 3 months until the springtime when the sun returns above the horizon. So long months of complete darkness, constant danger, crevasses and glaciers and ice fields, safe return doubtful, hopefully you make it back alive, honor and recognition in case of success. You too might be knighted, as Ernest Shackleton was by King George of England. Sir Ernest Shackleton, one of my great heroes. So the story of Shackleton and the Endurance Expedition has fueled a lot of people's imaginations and gotten people to become enthusiastic about Antarctica. It really is one of the great adventure and survival stories. This is Captain Robert Falcon Scott, a British naval officer who is the other one of the sort of triumvirate, the three most famous names in Antarctica: Ernest Shackleton, Captain Scott, and Roald Amundsen from Norway, who you saw a picture of earlier. Captain Scott led the very first British Antarctic expedition, and that gave Ernest Shackleton his first chance to go to Antarctica before the Endurance Expedition. 1901 to 1903 was this expedition. Captain Scott was a naval officer, he was a scientist as well, and he wanted to capitalize on the latest technology. Well, this is New Hampshire after all. Did you all recognize that these are snowmobiles? Maybe not. These are some of the first snow machines that were ever built. And here's Captain Scott testing out the prototypes in Norway in 1910, before his second expedition to Antarctica. So Captain Scott brought snowmobiles to Antarctica that had snow tracks on them and treads. They ended up not working too well because it was minus 30 degrees and the metal broke and cracked, but he brought them there. Captain Scott, though, also believed that, and I know it's a bit of a stretch to figure this out, Captain Scott was a believer in using horses and ponies to transport the loads, to haul a wooden sledge with 300 pounds of equipment. So Captain Scott brought ponies to Antarctica. Shackleton also used ponies. But Roald Amundsen, this is an older picture of Amundsen, the most famous of the Antarctic explorers, and truly the most successful explorer of all time. Roald Amundsen, he didn't believe in ponies, he believed in dogs. Huskies from Alaska. And these are some of the huskies that Amundsen brought on his ship. His ship is called the Fram. It means forward in Norwegian. You can still see the Fram. You can walk on the ship. It's at a ship museum in Oslo, Norway. I've actually walked on board this ship. But Amundsen believed in dogs, and obviously was an expert skier. Whereas Captain Scott was scientific and of a different bent. And perhaps Scott made a few tactical errors in his planning of his expedition, whereas Amundsen had spent significant amounts of time either in the Arctic or previously in the Antarctic on the Belgian expedition. But Captain Scott had a lot of pluses as well, because he brought the first professional photographer to Antarctica. And this is a very talented British photographer named Herbert Ponting, photographing Captain Scott's sailing ship, the Terra Nova. And look at this next picture, one of the great, stunningly beautiful pictures of Antarctica. Looking out an oval-shaped ice cave with long icicles hanging from it, two men looking at Captain Scott's ship, the Terra Nova. So these pictures that Herbert Ponting took also began to popularize Antarctica in the mass media, in newspapers and magazines. And Captain Scott, standing on the Ross ice shelf below Mount Erebus. Remember the volcano that erupts occasionally? You can still see some steam coming from the vent of Erebus. And so the British expeditions, Captain Scott led 2 expeditions to Antarctica. This is the hut that he built on his second expedition in 1910, right on the shore of the Ross Sea and right below the Ross Ice Shelf. So the men began using the ponies to haul their gear across the flat waste of the Ross Ice Shelf, across this big, flat, glaciated plateau. Then the ponies weakened. I'm sorry to say they were actually shot for food, and the meat of the ponies helped to feed the men. Captain Scott also had dogs, but he would not have anything to do with eating his dogs. The dogs helped to pull the loads, but they were not shot for food. The horses were, and after the horses had been put down, Captain Scott and his men resorted to a time-honored British technique called man-hauling, where the men put on a full-length harness, a shoulder and chest harness and waist harness, and they pulled 300 pounds of supplies through that deep snow, step by painful step. Man-hauling, with skis on or sometimes just without skis. Amundsen, coincidentally, decided also to attempt to reach the South Pole at the same time as Captain Scott's second expedition, 1910, 1911. Here's Captain Scott's ship, the Fram, with dogs on board. And Amundsen had a good sense of humor. He was a bit dry, but he had a good sense of humor. And later he gave a lecture where he used this joke. The British, they told me that dogs would not work in Antarctica. But I left Norway with 93 dogs, and when we got to Antarctica, we had 105 dogs. So Amundsen loved dogs. They were hard workers. He had used them in the Canadian Arctic on an earlier expedition. They sailed the Fram right up to the ice pack at the edge of the Ross Ice Shelf, unloaded their gear, used the dogs and the dog sleds to ferry equipment to a base camp. And the Norwegians were located right here, a place called the Bay of Whales, like the animals. Captain Scott is on Ross Island, which is by Mount Erebus. And so Captain Scott's route, which he and Shackleton had pioneered, went through the Transantarctic Mountains. Amundsen decided just to try to go in a straight line. Obviously, Amundsen had no idea what sort of difficulties he would encounter, but he was just going to go and figure it out. And Amundsen's motto was, slowly, slowly, we will reach our goal. Very Norwegian. You go outside and you try it, you do it, you adapt, you change, you do your best job. Slowly, slowly, we will reach our goal. Amundsen had actually built, but Amundsen never went unprepared. He liked to say that if you go out and have an adventure outside, like if things go wrong, that means that you just didn't plan well enough. So Amundsen was also a sea captain. He had built a hut, a prefabricated modular wooden hut in his garden back home in Norway. Then it was disassembled. The carpenter took it back down. Amundsen brought the shed and the carpenter with him and built it again in Antarctica. And it got all drifted in with snow, seen here. And this wooden shed became their base camp. In the background, you can see these funny-shaped conical tents, and that's where the dogs spent the winter, was each dog pack was in the different tents. Well, if you've ever watched the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, you know who wins the most gold medals in skiing? The Norwegians do. Very, very athletic, very graceful skiers. And so the Norwegians were probably born on skis. And so they have dogs to help pull the sleds. One skier went in front, leading the teams. And after about 6 weeks of skiing and dog sledding, Amundsen's team of Norwegians reached the South Pole first. And here is a very famous picture of one of Amundsen's teammates, Oscar Wisting, reaching the South Pole, putting up the Norwegian flag on December 14th of 1911. Amundsen spent 3.5 days camped at the South Pole, and he wanted to make sure there was no controversy whatsoever that he had actually made it, the first men in history to reach the South Pole. Robert Peary and Frederick Cook, the two Americans who both claimed to get to the North Pole first, to this day there's a lot of controversy. Did one man make it? Did both men make it? Did neither man make it to the North Pole when they said they did in 1908 and 1909? Those are other expeditions. They didn't do as good a job measuring their latitude, their longitude, making absolutely sure that they had reached that mathematical point at the top of the globe where all the vertical lines of longitude meet at one spot, the North Pole, the South Pole. Amundsen spent 3 days there taking very careful measurements, taking photographs, and he definitely made it to the South Pole. It's been verified. And here is the most famous picture of Amundsen and his men. Amundsen on the far left with his hawk-like nose. There actually were 5 men in the team. The 5th man took the photograph. And here is a tent. And ironically, it's a tent from the Belgian expedition that was made by Frederick Cook, the American doctor on the Belgian team. And so they set up the tent at the South Pole. The Norwegian flag is on top. The white flag beneath it is the flag of their ship, the Fram. And inside the tent, Amundsen wrote a letter to Captain Scott, assuming that Captain Scott would be the next person to get there. And he also wrote a letter to the King of Norway outlining how he had reached the South Pole with the different locations and dates. And he left these 2 letters in the tent, thinking that the next person, Captain Scott, would pick up the letters, hopefully, and bring them back with him. If anything tragic happened to Amundsen and his men on the return journey from the South Pole back to their base camp, those letters would provide evidence that they had reached the South Pole in December of 1911. So, Captain Scott's team is doggedly pursuing Amundsen, knowing that Amundsen was there. They knew there was this competition. Captain Scott was well aware that Amundsen was also trying to reach the South Pole at the same time. But the British kept slugging away. They got onto the polar plateau seen here, and the British team reached the South Pole approximately a little bit less than a month after, a little more than a month after Amundsen's team, about 5 weeks later. But in this picture of Captain Scott in the center, in the back, standing, and his teammates, there were 5 of them. They actually had a piece of wire attached to the camera, so they were able to pull a wire string to trip the shutter and take this picture. But in this picture, you can really see the amount of suffering that Captain Scott and his men have gone through to reach the South Pole on foot and by skis. 850 miles by foot over snow. And so they had begun to run short of food. On the way back, they ran short of fuel to do their cooking and also to heat the tents. It was late in the season. It was January, which in the southern hemisphere, January is the sort of midwinter, but in February and March, that's autumn and then verging on the start of winter. And so Captain Scott's team was late in the season in reaching the South Pole, and on the return journey that these men made, all of them perished. They all died one by one. One fell into a crevasse and hit his head and got a concussion. They began to run out of food and fuel, and they realized they were going to die. One man, they were caught in a blizzard that lasted for 2 weeks, immobilized, only 11 miles from safety, from their next depot of food and fuel. One man went out into the blizzard voluntarily and sacrificed himself to give his portion of food and fuel to his 3 remaining teammates. But they too also perished. About 8 months later, the rest of the expedition was at McMurdo Station base camp. They came back and looked for their partners and found their frozen bodies in a tent, along with their camera, which allowed this picture to be salvaged. They found the cameras, the diaries, the journals, and letters to their family and loved ones. So the story of Captain Scott sadly has a very tragic and sad ending. But it shows how unforgiving Antarctica can be. Antarctica is a landscape of superlatives. It is the coldest place on Earth, minus 85 degrees centigrade, right here at Vostok Station, the Russian base, in the wintertime. It's the coldest continent. It's the windiest continent. It's also a desert. Less than 2 inches of moisture falls in Antarctica in certain locations each year. And it has the highest average elevation of any continent, up to 16,000 feet above sea level. So Antarctica truly is a land of extremes and a land of peril that you want to be well prepared for. In more recent times, different nations of the world have actually claimed parts of Antarctica. And in 1959, a group of 12 nations sat down in Washington, D.C., and signed the Antarctic Treaty, which is still in effect today. And the Antarctic Treaty states that Antarctica will be saved for mankind and used only for peaceful scientific research. Those are the words, peaceful scientific research. There is no military presence in Antarctica by any country. Countries are allowed to inspect other bases freely, and there, as you can see, because of the extreme conditions, there's a lot of cooperation between the different research stations to make sure everybody stays healthy and safe. But there's a Chilean section, an Argentine section, a British section, a Norwegian section, Australian section, a French section. And the unclaimed section over here is actually widely regarded as the American section, because there were some American expeditions there in the 1930s by an explorer named Admiral Richard Byrd. Well, in Bath, Maine, not far from where I live, I happened to meet this gentleman one day. He repairs computers in his spare time. He's about 80 years old now, and his name is Ralph Lewis. And Ralph Lewis was the U.S. Navy photographer in Antarctica for 3 years in the early 1970s. And so Ralph kindly loaned me some of his photographs to show you McMurdo Station, the Ross Ice Shelf, Mount Erebus, and what it was like living and working in Antarctica on an American research station. So these big transport planes land on the Ross Ice Shelf. They fly in from Christchurch, New Zealand to reach Antarctica, and they were operated by the National Science Foundation and run by the US Navy. A very patriotic garment that this fellow has. I love this picture. Early 70s fashion in Antarctica. And McMurdo Station, believe it or not, is a small town. It has roads. It has a little highway sign. About 3,000 scientists live there each summer during the warm time of year, only about 50 to 100 in the winter time. And there's even a bar. There's the Last Chance Saloon. There's a post office. There's even a jail in McMurdo. And so Ralph Lewis, being the Navy photographer, had access to helicopter support as well. And this picture is taken near McMurdo Station of one of the most unusual and unique glacial forms ever in the world. These are called the dry valleys of Antarctica. This is rock at the bottom, a black, almost volcanic type rock. And these glaciers flow off of the Antarctic plateau down into the dry valleys, but the wind that roars downward, remember cold air sinks? As the cold air comes off the plateau, it sinks into these valleys, gains speed and accelerates, and the air is so strong and so dry, it evaporates the snow and ice of the glaciers. They don't melt, they evaporate into the air. It's called transpiration. And so these are the most unusual glaciers you'll ever see in your life. They just come down the hillside and they end. And they evaporate slowly into the atmosphere. So the dry valleys, glaciologists have played a key role in the science of Antarctica, drilling ice cores and sampling. Look at this, a piece of ice from 13,000 BC, 13,000 years before the birth of Christ. These snowflakes fell in Antarctica and then were compressed into ice and then buried in the glacier by more snow and ice over many millennium. And so scientists can explore the little bubbles of air that are trapped in these ice cores, and they can actually tell what the atmosphere was like on Earth 13,000 years ago. Another new form of research from recent times is exploring the seabed and the wildlife and plant life below the ice. And so this is scuba diving in Antarctica under the ice, right off of the shoreline. And look at the marvelous colors of these sea anemones and a starfish or two. Wouldn't that be incredibly exciting? Go scuba diving in Antarctica. Other scientists also made a very important discovery in 1985. They discovered what became known as the Ozone Hole, which some of you have probably heard of. Ozone is a chemical layer in the atmosphere that protects the Earth from harmful ultraviolet light from the sun. If you get too much ultraviolet light, you can get cancer on your skin. You can get skin cancer. And so what these scientists, they were British scientists, they discovered that there was actually a hole, an opening in the ozone layer over Antarctica every spring. And it was getting worse. It was getting wider each year because of aerosol cans using something called chlorofluorocarbons and also refrigeration chemicals in refrigerators. And it was really one of the great examples of international scientific cooperation when these dangerous chemicals the carbon chlorofibers, it's so hard to say, carbon chlorofibers, they were banned worldwide. Fluorocarbons, they were banned. And now cooperation has led to the slow healing of the ozone hole in recent years. So that's a very nice success story about Antarctica and about science. As I mentioned, there's about 50 or 60 scientific research stations measuring electromagnetism and wind and ocean currents, and also the slow melting of the ice shelves. And so when the ice freezes in the wintertime around Antarctica, the continent of Antarctica actually grows half again as large. So Antarctica is 1.5 times its normal diameter in the winter. And then in the spring, the ice shelves melt, and this is the brash ice or the ice flows that surround Antarctica most of the year. And then the large ice shelves, like the Larsen Ice Shelf, occasionally a big iceberg will break off and slowly float to the north, away from Antarctica into the South Atlantic. And so this is also the result of climate change. But climate has changed dramatically over the millennia. If you look at any history of the Earth, there have been cold periods and there have been warm periods. There have also been periods where the continents were joined together. The outline of the world's continents looked much different 65 million years ago. And the climate in Antarctica, believe it or not, was tropical. There were tropical plants growing in Antarctica 65 to 100 million years ago. Ferns, seashells, and some small animal life that were the precursors of dinosaurs. And so Antarctica has experienced climate fluctuation. But when you finally reach the South Pole, the most desolate, windswept landscape on Earth, now you are truly at the end of the world. I would love to go to the South Pole at some point, but we'll have to suffice with this marvelous photograph taken by my friend Ralph Lewis. Imagine you're in a plane flying over Antarctica and you're landing at the South Pole. I really love this picture. And you can almost see the curvature of the Earth itself in this photograph. So here is the southern point of the planet Earth. America has built another research station here on the South Pole. And they built buildings. They built a geodesic dome in the far upper right corner. That's actually been dismantled recently. But the main headquarters right here is built on stilts. These are pneumatic stilts. So as the snow slowly accumulates, inch by inch each year, you can raise the building above the snowpack. And that's why that building is built on stilts. And here is the actual South Pole of the Earth. The barbershop pole, right here in the center with a small mirror globe on the top. But because it's on a glacier, an ice cap, the marker moves, as the ice moves, about 15 feet every year. And then they have to pick up the barbershop pole and move it to the correct location. So this is the ceremonial South Pole with the American base in the background. And here's a close-up at the South Pole honoring Roald Amundsen and Captain Scott. So this is known as Amundsen Scott Station, the US base at the South Pole. So one of the most remote places to go. Well, all these stories about other explorers, they led me to really dream that maybe one day I'd be fortunate enough to go to Antarctica. And in 2018, that dream came true. I got hired by Cork Expeditions to be a polar history lecturer and to join them on their ships and to give history presentations about the famous explorers of Antarctica. I flew all the way to the southernmost city on Earth, Ushuaia in southern Argentina. I'd never been in Argentina. I'd never been in South America. I don't speak Spanish. I'd never been on a cruise ship. So this was a lot of learning for me. But it was an amazing time in my life, an amazing adventure. And so we departed from Ushuaia, seen up here, sailed past Cape Horn, across the Drake Passage to the South Shetland Islands and the Antarctic Peninsula. This is one of the ships that I was on, called the Ocean Endeavour. I've actually been on a total of 4 ships going to Antarctica. You leave Ushuaia, and then a few hours later, you enter the Drake Passage. And at times, the Drake Passage can be relatively tranquil. You have seagulls and also the albatross, the wandering albatross, that fly and circle around the ship as you head out across open ocean. But then, if a low pressure system hits, the waves grow in height up to 15 to 20 feet, and the bow of the ship slams into one wave after the next, and the waves on the bow of the ship can be tremendous. So it's not for the faint of heart. Seasickness is definitely a problem. I got a little bit seasick, but not too bad. You can take medication for it as well, luckily. But being out at sea is an acquired taste. And finally, after 2 days of voyaging across the Drake Passage, land ho! The South Shetland Islands, and here are the penguins right in front of the Cork Expedition ship. So, to go and visit the penguins, you disembark the ship on a gangway. You walk carefully down a little stairway out to the Zodiac, which is an inflatable rubber raft with an outboard motor. You have your driver, one of the Cork employees, and everyone is wearing survival equipment, waterproof clothing. You're very well insulated. You have waterproof boots on that are they're called Arctic muck boots, just like muck boots around here, but warmer. And you get out in your Zodiac, and your driver drives you into shore. Usually it's about a 15-minute drive in your Zodiac. Everybody has on these bright gold-colored jackets, so you're easy to spot once you get ashore. And one of the things about going on journeys like this, look at the faces of the passengers I was with. I was meeting people from all over the world. And on some of the Cork expeditions that I participated on, we had up to 20 nationalities on one journey. From India and China and Japan and Ireland and Canada, the US, South America, Africa, all over. Tremendous, interesting variety of people. You pull up to one of these cobblestone beaches, and the penguins are waiting for you. I know it's hard to believe. There are 20 million penguins that live in Antarctica. 19 different species of penguins. And so you pull up, and the penguins are right there. Penguins have been evolving in Antarctica for 60 million years. And the tallest are the emperor penguins. The king penguins are a little bit smaller. And these are Gentoo penguins. They're about this big. And you can see they're completely impervious to the cold. They probably like living in New Hampshire in the wintertime, don't you think? Yeah, I think they would. They've got good insulation, Snow doesn't bother them at all. And they are just as cute as you can imagine. They are just like the penguins in Happy Feet. And this is a chin strap penguin, which has a little strap, almost pretending to hold its hat on. And chin strap penguins and other penguins, they often will walk waddling like this in a parade, one after the next. So they're totally adorable. They're very peaceful. They like to play, and they like to go tobogganing on their tummy. So they slide forward on their stomach, and they have fun flapping their wings, propelling them along the snow like this, just like you do on a hill at home in the winter. Well, the mother penguins lay eggs in December, which is the beginning of their summer in the southern hemisphere. Most of the moms lay 2 to 3 eggs. Some only lay 1, but many of them lay 2. So this is a Gentoo penguin with her 2 eggs. She's sitting on her nest, and the mom and dad take turns keeping the eggs warm. And then a month later, little baby penguins are born. Aren't they the cutest? They're so cute. Little tiny penguin, only a few days old. And what's better than 1 little penguin chick? 2 little penguin chicks. So adorable and soft and cute. And here's the mom. The Gentoos have a very obvious orange beak. The mom taking care of the little baby. I'll show you how penguins feed each other a bit later. But there are other kinds of penguins too. And maybe some of you watching tonight have actually heard of macaroni penguins. All kids love macaroni, and they probably love macaroni penguins too. Macaroni penguins have eyebrows that are the same color as Kraft macaroni and cheese. And they kind of stick out. These little hairy eyebrows that are orange. Aren't they cute? And this macaroni penguin was lost, and it was living with some chinstrap penguins. And everyone on my team decided that this macaroni penguin was actually in love. And so here is a video of some of the macaroni penguin and some of the chin straps. So you get a chance here to see how they walk and hop. This is the macaroni penguin in the front. He's just with these other chin straps. He was nicknamed Kevin. Kevin, the macaroni penguin. But you know, look how peaceful they are, just hanging out, you know. Yeah, I love this bit of footage. This was taken by a friend of mine, Adrian, who was the glaciologist for Cork expeditions. She took this with her iPhone, this little video. Penguins walk the exact same route every day between the rookery up above in the rocks and the ocean where they get food. And these are known as penguin highways. They get deeper and deeper as the season goes on, as the animals go up and down for food. So here are some more Gentoo penguins walking down a penguin highway to the ocean. And that's our ship in the distance. Oh, and someone else is late. Oh, here comes the next one. So the penguin highways are actually like little furrows in the snow. And the penguins always have the right of way. So when a penguin is coming down the penguin highway, you have to stop and wait, let the penguin go in front of you, and then it's your turn to walk across the highway. Now, in this video, the penguin moms are nesting on their nests. It's later in the season, it's in December. You can see the egg. And the males, their job is to build up the nest with rocks. But there's not enough rocks to go around. So the male penguins, they like to borrow rocks from the nests nearby and build up their nest, because that makes their wife feel really happy. And so let's just watch this one again. So you can see that the mom is guarding the nest and the egg, while the neighbor is stealing rocks and making its own nest a little bit bigger. And this goes on constantly for hours. And the mom can't really do anything because she has to guard the egg. She just squawks at the neighbor. Well, there are some predators in Antarctica, and these are the predatory birds called a skua, which is kind of like a big crow. And the skuas, if the eggs are not guarded well enough, the skua will swoop down, grab the egg, and that's how they feed their babies. So skuas eat penguin eggs, and someone else also likes to eat penguins. Maybe some of you know who this is. This is a leopard seal. And they have such cute little smiles, don't they? They have a kind of a cute little smile, but they also have to eat and they have to feed their babies, so they eat penguins. And so when the penguins dive in the water, I got this off the internet too, I have to confess. When the penguins dive in the water, they often are caught unawares by a leopard seal that's hiding beneath an ice floe. And leopard seals are up to 12 feet long. They're amazingly long. And here is a video of a leopard seal that was right off the ship. We were actually in the dining room when we saw this leopard seal. So we stood up from lunch and got a video of the leopard seal with some skuas on the left. And so the leopard seal, it moves a little bit like, maybe even like a snake. Oh, it's having a drink of water. And another drink. Whoa, and there it goes, right into the ocean. So the leopard seals are also, they're one of the top predators in Antarctica. One of the other great, magnificent animals, though, at the southern end of the world are the whales. And this is a humpback whale and a calf. The humpbacks and the minke whales, occasionally a blue whale, the largest whale on Earth, a fin whale, a right whale. These whales will migrate from the tropical waters just south of the equator all the way down the coast of South America, in the Atlantic and also in the Pacific, all the way down to the Antarctic waters each summer. So in January and February, which is the height of summer in Antarctica, in the southern hemisphere, you often get amazing displays of whales. And when the whale comes up, it has its tail, but also it has the dorsal fin. And so the dorsal fin of a humpback has a slight hump in the dorsal fin. And the tail of a humpback whale has a fingerprint. I suppose you could call it a tail print. But it's a unique form of coloring with white, unique to each whale, like a fingerprint, like your own fingerprint. And so the coloring, the shape of the white area, and also the shape of the tail, the notches that are at the top of the tail, those are unique to every single whale. And if you go to a website called happywhale.com, you can actually find out where different whales are located in different oceans of the world based on their fingerprints or their tail markings. And so when the whale comes up, because it's a mammal, it has to breathe, it takes a big lungful of air, and then it dives down, and the tail comes up as the whale dives. And this is called breaching. So here's a breaching whale with its tail. And this is, oh my gosh, moment. Look what just surfaced right next to our zodiac. A humpback whale has just come over to say hello to us. Whales, like the penguins, are also very peaceful. There are no reports at all of any whale ever flipping over a zodiac, or even really nudging a zodiac with its body, its dorsal fin, or its tail. But the whales will come over and say hello. The etiquette with the zodiac, if you see whales, you immediately turn off your engine so you're quiet. You don't want any outboard sound from the outboard motor. Then, as you drift in your zodiac quietly, if you're very, very lucky, the whale will come over and say hello. And if you're really, really lucky, your whale will breach vertically out of the water in play. And often it's the young juveniles, the teenage whales that do this. They'll come shooting up out of the ocean. You have no warning whatsoever. Suddenly this huge whale comes right up out of the ocean and then does a belly flop and a big, big splash. And it's so impressive to see. Now, does anyone know the markings on this whale? Aha, I see some hands going up. Yes, an orca. So orca whales, you know them from SeaWorld in Florida, but orca whales come from the big ocean, and they often are living in the summer in Antarctica because there's so much food during the summer months in Antarctica. Orca whales travel in a small group. Oh, I bet you've heard of this name. They travel in a small group called a pod. And so the pod, who rules the pod? Who's the ruler of the pod? The leader? Mom. The moms are in charge of the family, and they all travel together in a small group in the open ocean. So this is a rare video of orcas out in the open ocean. So the orcas are coming up in the lower right-hand corner. You can see the mom, the baby, and a little higher up, the larger orca was the dad. But it's so rare to get a view like this of orca whales in open ocean. And then they just dive down and they just disappear. But we got to see them, and that was tremendously exciting. The colors in Antarctica, the icebergs are unforgettable. The icebergs come in every possible shape. Castles, portholes and archways, different towers, just the most amazing shapes. And on a beautiful day, you might even go kayaking, sea kayaking in Antarctica from the ship with a group of friends with the Antarctic Peninsula in the background. And this was the World Explorer. This was my home last year for 5 months. I lived on this ship, making repeated journeys from the city of Ushuaia in Argentina, across the Drake Passage to the Antarctic Peninsula. And so the gangway on the left, on the starboard side, and well, let's just say you're not exactly suffering on one of these cruises because you have white tablecloths, you have fantastic food, you have waiters, you don't have to wash the dishes, and it's absolutely fantastic food. I would also like to say that we had no cases of COVID last winter at all, or last season at all, none. But we can all hope and pray that COVID eventually will decline and go away, and that we'll be able to start journeying again. And there are some crazy people in the world, and there are some people that even like to jump into the Antarctic Ocean. Would any of you like to do that, perhaps? And this is known as the polar plunge. You can do it in frozen lakes in New Hampshire, too, in the wintertime. Cut a hole in the ice and jump in. This was 0 degrees water. This man jumping in for the polar plunge, and I actually did it 3 times. And it's something you do very, very quickly. You're in the water for about 30 seconds. So you jump in, you're so exhilarated, you get a big rush of blood to your heart and your muscles, and you swim back out and celebrate with a big whoop. And if you're very fortunate, you may encounter weather like this. It doesn't look like Antarctica because it looks so warm and so tranquil. And this is the Antarctic Peninsula on the right and Booth Island on the left. And between the island and the mainland, right in this section right here, is one of the most famous waterways in Antarctica, the Lemaire Channel. And the Lemaire Channel is 7 miles long. It's a fjord, which is a Norwegian word meaning a deep ocean passageway. It's hundreds of meters and feet deep, but very narrow and long. And so to sail a big ship, this is the World Explorer, that same big ship, to sail in a big sailing ship through the Lemaire Channel was just an amazing experience. It's one of the rites of passage of visiting Antarctica. And on this particular night, we had a glorious, glorious sunset from the Lemaire Channel. And so you have landscapes beyond anything of your imagination. Absolutely beautiful, pristine nature. Animals of all sorts, whales, penguins, also seals, which we're getting to, and Adelie penguins, the really cute ones here with the white eyes. Seals are laying on the icebergs, getting some sun. And here is a seal that I met one day. This is a fur seal. And this is actually on an island called Desolation Island. No, it's Deception Island. And this whale was, they actually whimper a little bit like a dog. So I was talking to the seal like it was my dog. But seals are a little bit dangerous though. They can run after you and bite you. So you have to be careful around them. But this one was cute and friendly. A fur seal. There's also crab-eater seals and Weddell seals. And now here is a penguin mom being chased by its baby. And this is my luckiest video. Took me a long time to get this on film. And so this illustrates how, the mom just bumped right into one of the neighbors. But this video illustrates how penguins are fed. So the mom is in the bottom. Here comes the baby. So the baby will now rub its beak against the mom's beak. And this mom is a little bit not really wanting to feed the baby, but eventually the mom does. And they regurgitate some fish that, or krill, which are little shrimp that they've eaten, feeds the baby, and then the mom runs away. And the mom even does a little tobogganing on its belly. And you see this kind of behavior all the time. Some moms are more cooperative than others. And underwater, seals are so graceful. This is a slow motion underwater video taken by one of my other teammates, Vladimir, from Russia. With those big whiskers. But when you see the animals underwater in their element, you get a different view of how they behave and how they act. Okay, this is the most amazing piece of video you may ever see. This is a pod of orca whales, and watch what happens. This video was filmed by a friend of mine named Avon King. So the orcas are out in the open ocean. They're feeding probably on seals or on penguins. And now in the lower right, the orca swam right under their zodiac twice in each direction. I'll just play it again. So, seeing orcas when you're out in the zodiac would be incredibly exciting. But then to have what they had happen is just hard to comprehend. You'll see the orca. You can see the white of its belly or its back in the water as it begins to swim right towards the zodiac. Right in this section, you'll see it come through the water. There it is. And then the orca sees the other zodiac and does a U-turn and goes right back under the first zodiac. Unbelievable. I wish I had been there. Avon talked about this for the rest of the journey. It was such an amazing experience. But for me, it was a lifelong dream to actually set foot in and on Antarctica. It was so incredibly exciting to finally reach this remote landscape covered with snow and ice, with these exotic, beautiful animals at the bottom of the world, at the end of the earth, the great frozen south of Antarctica was a dream come true. And I hope that those of you who have enjoyed this show, watching it, that you will also have a chance one day of visiting the land of the penguins, Antarctica, the most remote place on Earth. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thanks so much. I hope you all enjoyed that. Thanks so much. Thank you.